Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I never thought I would end up in small claims court over a gate, but here we are. This whole mess started about 2 years ago when I bought my house in what I thought was a quiet neighborhood. The house sits at the end of a cul-de-sac, which was exactly what I wanted. Privacy, less traffic, and a decent-sized lot where I could actually park without someone breathing down my neck. The driveway has a slight incline up from the street. Nothing crazy, maybe a 5 or 6% grade. The city inspector signed off on it when the house was built, and it meets all local codes. At the top of the driveway, about 20 feet back from the road, I had installed a solid wooden gate. It was built from thick cedar posts and heavy planks, the kind of gate that would last decades if properly maintained. The HOA had a list of approved gate styles, and mine was right there on page 3 of their architectural guidelines. But apparently, having a nice gate and a slightly inclined driveway made me a target for the neighborhood control freak. Her name was Brenda, and she was the HOA president. Middle-aged woman who drove around in a pristine white luxury SUV that probably cost more than most people make in a year. She had this habit of cruising the neighborhood like she was patrolling her personal kingdom, looking for violations and problems that didn't exist. Within my first month of living there, she had already made 2 separate visits to my house. The first time, she knocked on my door on a Saturday morning while I was trying to enjoy my coffee. She introduced herself with this fake smile and told me how wonderful it was to have new residents who clearly cared about property values. Then she pivoted to my gate, saying it looked very sturdy but seemed somewhat unwelcoming to visitors. I politely pointed out that it was on the approved list, and she said yes, technically that was true, but she hoped I would consider the community spirit when making future modifications. The second visit came about 3 weeks later, right after our first snowfall of the season. She knocked again, this time with a more serious expression. She wanted to discuss what she called my driveway situation. Apparently, she was concerned about the incline creating liability issues for the neighborhood during winter weather. She kept using phrases like needing to be careful and making sure everyone stays safe. The whole conversation had this passive-aggressive undertone where she was clearly implying that my perfectly legal driveway was somehow a problem waiting to happen. I listened politely, thanked her for her concern, and explained that the driveway met all municipal codes and had been approved by the city during construction. She gave me this tight smile and said she certainly hoped there would never be any incidents that might reflect poorly on the community. Then she climbed back into her spotless SUV and drove away. That was 6 months ago, and I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. Fast forward to last November. The Weather Service had been predicting a nasty ice storm for our area, the kind of freezing rain over snow that turns every surface into a skating rink. I spent the day before preparing like any responsible homeowner would. I picked up extra ice melt from the hardware store, checked my car's tires to make sure they had good tread, and cleared all the loose branches from around my property. I even put out extra birdseed for the wildlife that would struggle to find food after the storm. The ice started falling around midnight. I could hear it tapping against my windows as I went to sleep, that distinct sound of freezing rain hitting glass. By morning, everything outside was covered in a thick layer of ice. The trees looked like crystal sculptures, and the roads were basically unusable death traps. I was in my kitchen around 7 in the morning making coffee and looking out at the winter wonderland when I heard it. This loud crunch followed by the unmistakable sound of splintering wood. The noise was so sudden and violent that I nearly dropped my mug. I looked out my front window and could not believe what I was seeing. There was Brenda's massive white SUV, nose first through my gate. One of my thick cedar gate posts was snapped clean at the base, and the heavy wooden gate itself was hanging at a crazy angle, held up only by the other post. Steam was rising from the SUV's hood, and I could see chunks of wood and metal scattered across my driveway. My first instinct was to grab my phone and start recording. I knew this was going to be a situation and I wanted documentation. I held the phone up to the window and started filming the entire scene. The damage to my gate was extensive, probably a complete rebuild job. The front of her SUV was crumpled pretty badly too, with the bumper hanging loose and the grille smashed in. While I was filming, Brenda climbed out of her vehicle. Even from my window, I could see she was already red-faced and gesturing angrily. She walked around her SUV, looked at the damage, and then started marching toward my front door. I kept recording as I filmed her approach, and that's when I noticed something interesting. Her SUV was sitting at an angle that gave me a clear view of her tires. I zoomed in with my phone camera, and what I saw made me glad I was documenting everything. Her tires were completely bald. Not just low on tread, but smooth as a baby's bottom. These looked like high-performance summer tires that had been worn down to nothing, the kind of rubber that would be absolutely useless on ice. I also got a good shot of her license plate area, and noticed her registration sticker in the rear window looked off. I zoomed in and realized it was expired, not by a few days, but by at least 2 months. By this time, Brenda was pounding on my door. I put my phone in my pocket and went to answer it, already knowing this conversation was not going to go well. Before I could even ask if she was hurt or needed help, Brenda launched into a tirade that would have made a sailor blush. She was screaming about how my driveway was a death trap and how this whole mess was my fault. She kept repeating the phrase unsafe incline like it was some kind of legal magic spell that would make me liable for her stupidity. According to her version of events, my driveway had caused her to lose control of her vehicle, resulting in thousands of dollars in damage to her SUV. She was demanding that I contact my insurance company immediately to cover her repairs, and she wanted me to pay for any deductible or other costs she might incur. She also mentioned something about emotional distress and how traumatic the whole experience had been. I let her rant for about 2 minutes while I mentally prepared my response. When she finally paused to take a breath, I calmly told her that I was going to call the sheriff's department to file an official accident report. The change in her demeanor was immediate and dramatic. Her face went from red to pale in about 3 seconds, and she started backpedaling fast. Suddenly, she was saying this was just a neighborhood matter that could be handled through the HOA. There was no need to involve law enforcement in what was clearly a simple property dispute. She even offered to have her insurance company contact mine directly to work everything out without any official reports or documentation. I ignored her protests and called the non-emergency number for the sheriff's department. I explained that there had been a vehicle accident on my property with damage to both vehicles and structures, and requested that a deputy come out to document the incident. The dispatcher said they would send someone within the hour. While we waited, Brenda continued trying to convince me that involving the police was unnecessary and potentially harmful to both of our interests. She reminded me that as HOA president, she had a responsibility to maintain good relationships between neighbors. She also hinted that making this into a big deal might result in increased scrutiny of my property and potential violations that could be costly to remedy. I just smiled and suggested we wait for the deputy to arrive before making any decisions about how to handle the situation. The sheriff's deputy showed up about 45 minutes later. He was a middle-aged guy who looked like he had seen everything at least twice. Brenda immediately approached him with her most charming personality, explaining how she was the HOA president and how this was just an unfortunate accident caused by dangerous road conditions. She gave him her version of the story, emphasizing the icy conditions and the incline of my driveway. She painted herself as an innocent victim who had lost control through no fault of her own, and suggested that my property presented an ongoing hazard to the community. She was very careful to present herself as the responsible party who was just trying to resolve things amicably. The deputy listened to her politely, took some notes, and then asked for my statement. I kept it simple and factual. I told him that I had heard a crash, looked outside, and found her vehicle embedded in my gate. I mentioned that I had video documentation of the aftermath, including the condition of her vehicle and tires. When I mentioned the tires, the deputy's expression changed slightly. He walked over to examine Brenda's SUV more closely, and I could see him crouching down to look at the wheels. After a few minutes of inspection, he walked back to his cruiser to run her license plate and registration. Brenda was getting nervous now, asking what was taking so long and whether we could hurry this process along. She mentioned that she had important HOA business to attend to and really needed to get her vehicle towed and repaired as quickly as possible. The deputy returned with his citation book and asked Brenda for her driver's license and registration. She handed over her license but seemed to be having trouble finding her registration paperwork. After a few minutes of searching through her glove compartment and center console, she produced a registration card that the deputy examined carefully. He spent another few minutes writing, then handed her 2 separate citations. The first was for operating a vehicle with unsafe tire equipment, which apparently was a serious offense in our state during winter conditions. The second was for expired registration, since her paperwork was more than 60 days out of date. The deputy explained to Brenda that driving on ice with bald tires was not just dangerous but potentially criminal, especially in a residential area where children might be present. He told her she was lucky she had only hit a gate and not a person, and that she needed to have her vehicle towed rather than attempting to drive it in its current condition. Brenda's reaction was exactly what you would expect from someone used to getting her way through intimidation and authority. She demanded to speak to the deputy supervisor, accused him of not understanding the full situation, and suggested that his investigation had been incomplete and biased. She also made some comments about knowing people in local government who would be very interested to hear about this interaction. The deputy remained completely professional throughout her outburst. He simply handed me a copy of the incident report, gave me a report number for my insurance company, and suggested that I document any damage to my property with photographs and repair estimates. He also recommended that I contact my insurance carrier as soon as possible to report the incident. After the deputy left, Brenda made one final attempt to convince me that we could handle this privately. She offered to pay for my gate repair out of pocket if I would agree not to file an insurance claim or pursue any legal action. She emphasized that this kind of public dispute could harm both of our property values and create ongoing tension in the neighborhood. I thanked her for the offer, but explained that I needed to follow proper procedures and let the insurance companies sort everything out. She was not happy with this response, but there wasn't much she could do at that point. She called a tow truck for her SUV and spent the rest of the morning waiting in her house for it to arrive. I spent the time documenting everything thoroughly. I took dozens of photos of the gate damage from every possible angle, measured the broken posts and panels, and started getting quotes for repairs. I also made backup copies of my video footage and uploaded everything to cloud storage just in case. A week later, I received a letter in the mail that changed this from a simple insurance matter into something much more complicated. The letter was from a law firm representing Brenda personally, not the HOA. It demanded that I provide my insurance information and authorize payment of $8,000 for vehicle repairs and emotional distress allegedly caused by my negligently maintained and hazardous incline driveway. The letter was full of legal language about premises liability and homeowner responsibilities for maintaining safe conditions. It claimed that my driveway presented an attractive nuisance and ongoing danger to the community, and that I had a duty to warn visitors about potential hazards. It also suggested that my failure to properly maintain winter road conditions on my private property had directly caused the accident. I forwarded the letter to my insurance company and expected them to handle the matter through their standard procedures. What happened next surprised me. My insurance company reviewed the police report, looked at my video footage, and denied Brenda's claim within a single business day. Their letter was short and to the point. Based on the available evidence, their insured party bore no responsibility for the incident, and they would not be providing any coverage or compensation. I figured that would be the end of it. Brenda had made her demand, my insurance company had responded, and now she could file a claim with her own carrier, or accept responsibility for her own actions. I was wrong again. 2 weeks after my insurance company denied her claim, I received a summons to appear in small claims court. Brenda was suing me personally for the full $8,000, plus court costs and additional damages for the inconvenience and stress of dealing with this matter. The lawsuit was even more ridiculous than her lawyer's letter. She was claiming that my driveway was a public nuisance that violated community standards for safety and accessibility. She alleged that I had created an ice luge that was inherently dangerous to any vehicle attempting to navigate it during winter conditions. She also claimed that my gate was positioned in such a way as to create a traffic hazard for anyone who might lose control while driving past my property. Reading through her court filing was like entering an alternate reality where basic physics and personal responsibility didn't exist. According to her version of events, she was an experienced and careful driver who had been victimized by my reckless disregard for community safety. She painted herself as a concerned community leader who was only seeking fair compensation for damages caused by my negligence. I realized this had moved beyond a simple accident into something personal. Brenda wasn't just trying to avoid responsibility for her mistake, she was trying to punish me for not backing down when she expected me to. This was about power and control, and she was using the legal system to try to force me into submission. Since this was small claims court, I didn't need to hire a lawyer, which was good because I wasn't about to spend thousands of dollars defending myself against this nonsense. Instead, I decided to prepare my case as thoroughly as possible and let the evidence speak for itself. I spent several days organizing all my documentation into a coherent presentation. I printed out large, clear photos of Brenda's bald tires from multiple angles. I made copies of the expired registration sticker that was clearly visible in my footage. I got an official copy of the police report that included both citations she had received. I also researched and printed out the local municipal code that defined safe vehicle equipment requirements. For my property damage, I got 3 separate quotes for gate repair from licensed contractors. The estimates ranged from $2,100 to $2,400 with an average of about $2,200. I also calculated my court filing costs, which came to $50 for the countersuit I planned to file. The key piece of evidence was my video footage. I transferred it to a tablet and practiced queuing it up to the most important sections. I wanted to be able to show the judge exactly what had happened and what condition Brenda's vehicle was in immediately after the incident. I also decided to file a countersuit against Brenda for the cost of my gate repair plus court costs. If she wanted to play legal games, I was going to make sure she understood that actions have consequences. The court date was set for a Tuesday morning in December, about 6 weeks after the original incident. I arrived early and spent some time observing other cases to get a feel for how the judge handled different types of disputes. He seemed fair, but no nonsense, the kind of person who appreciated facts over drama. When our case was called, Brenda was dressed like she was appearing before the Supreme Court. She had clearly spent considerable time and money preparing her presentation, with professionally bound documents and what looked like architectural drawings of my driveway. The judge asked Brenda to present her case first, since she was the plaintiff. She launched into a 20-minute presentation about community safety standards and homeowner liability that would have been impressive if it had any basis in reality. She described my driveway as an ongoing hazard that violated both HOA standards and municipal safety codes. She claimed that the incline created dangerous conditions that were impossible to navigate safely during winter weather. She presented her $8,000 repair bill and added claims for rental car costs, increased insurance premiums, and compensation for the time she had spent dealing with this matter. She also requested that the court order me to modify my driveway to eliminate the safety hazard it allegedly created. Throughout her presentation, she kept referring to herself as a concerned community leader who was only trying to protect other residents from similar incidents. She painted me as an irresponsible homeowner who had refused to acknowledge or address a clear danger to the neighborhood. When she finished, the judge asked me to respond. I kept my presentation simple and focused on the facts. I started by showing the judge the official police report, which clearly documented the 2 citations Brenda had received for unsafe vehicle equipment and expired registration. Then I showed him the photographs of her bald tires, pointing out that they were completely worn down to the point where no tread was visible. I explained that these were apparently summer performance tires that had been worn beyond any safe operating condition, especially for winter driving on icy roads. I showed him the photo of her expired registration sticker and read aloud the state law requiring all vehicles to maintain current registration and safe operating equipment. I pointed out that Brenda had been operating an illegally equipped vehicle at the time of the incident. Finally, I played the video footage on my tablet, narrating what the judge was seeing. The footage clearly showed the aftermath of the crash, the condition of Brenda's tires, and the extensive damage to my gate. I pointed out that my driveway had been safely navigated by countless vehicles over the years, including delivery trucks and emergency vehicles during previous winter weather events. For my countersuit, I presented the 3 repair estimates and explained that I was seeking compensation for the replacement cost of my gate plus court filing fees. I emphasized that my gate had been properly constructed according to HOA guidelines and had been functioning safely for years before Brenda destroyed it with her negligent driving. The judge didn't need much time to reach his decision. He looked at Brenda and told her that she was suing the wrong person. He explained that she was 100% at fault for the incident because she had failed to maintain her vehicle in safe operating condition. He pointed out that driving on ice with bald tires was not just negligent, but reckless, and that she was fortunate the only damage had been to property rather than people. Her lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, which meant she could never file the same claim again. The judge then turned to my countersuit and ruled in my favor for the full amount I had requested. He ordered Brenda to pay me $2,200 for the gate replacement plus $50 in court costs for a total judgment of $2,250. The look on Brenda's face when the judge announced his decision was worth every minute I had spent preparing for court. She tried to argue with the ruling, claiming that the judge hadn't fully considered the community safety implications of allowing dangerous driveways to exist in residential areas. The judge firmly told her that the matter was closed and advised her to focus on maintaining her own vehicle properly rather than blaming others for her mistakes. After the hearing, Brenda approached me in the hallway outside the courtroom. She was clearly furious but trying to maintain some semblance of dignity. She asked whether I would be willing to accept a payment plan rather than requiring immediate full payment of the judgment. I told her that I expected payment within 30 days as specified by the court order, but that how she arranged her finances was her own business. She wrote me a personal check for the full amount right there in the courthouse lobby. I could tell it pained her to hand over that money, especially knowing that she still had to pay for her own vehicle repairs and the fines from her traffic citations. Her $8,000 mistake had turned into a financial disaster that was entirely of her own making. I deposited the check the same day, half expecting her to try to stop payment out of spite, but the funds cleared without any problems, and I had the money in my account within 2 business days. With Brenda's payment, I was able to hire the contractor who had given me the best quote for the gate replacement. Instead of rebuilding the original wooden gate, I decided to upgrade to a stronger steel design that was still within HOA guidelines but would be much more durable and secure. The new gate was installed the following week. It was a beautiful black steel construction with decorative elements that actually looked more elegant than my original wooden gate. The contractor did excellent work, and the final result exceeded my expectations in every way, but I wasn't quite finished with this situation. I had one more addition to make to the new gate that would serve as a permanent reminder of the lessons learned from this whole experience. I had a small metal plaque made at a local engraving shop. It was about 4 inches by 6 inches, made from brushed aluminum with black lettering. The message was simple but perfect for the occasion. It read, "Caution, consequences ahead." I mounted the plaque on the new gate post where it would be clearly visible to anyone approaching from the street. It was subtle enough to meet HOA standards, but obvious enough to make its point to anyone who might be thinking about blaming others for their own poor decisions. The day after the plaque was installed, I was sitting on my front porch enjoying my morning coffee when I noticed Brenda's garage door was closed tight. Her damaged SUV was nowhere to be seen, probably hidden away while she dealt with the expensive repairs that were entirely her own responsibility. I couldn't help but smile as I looked at my new gate and its special edition. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people experience the natural consequences of their own actions. Brenda had learned an expensive lesson about personal responsibility, and I had learned that standing up to bullies with facts and preparation could lead to very satisfying results. The whole experience had cost Brenda thousands of dollars in vehicle repairs, hundreds of dollars in fines and court costs, and the humiliation of being publicly held responsible for her own mistakes. Meanwhile, I had ended up with a better gate than I started with, and the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. As I finished my coffee and prepared to start my day, I reflected on how this whole situation had developed. What started as an attempt to intimidate me into taking responsibility for someone else's negligence had backfired completely. Brenda's arrogance and refusal to accept responsibility for her own actions had turned a simple accident into a legal and financial disaster that was entirely of her own making. The best part was knowing that every time she drove past my house, she would see that gate and remember exactly how much her attempt to bully me had cost her. The small plaque with its simple message would serve as a daily reminder that actions have consequences, and that trying to blame others for your own mistakes rarely ends well. I went inside to start my day, confident that I had handled the situation properly and that Brenda had learned a valuable lesson about personal responsibility. Sometimes the universe has a way of balancing things out, and in this case, justice had been served with a side of poetic satisfaction. The gate stands strong to this day, and I've never had another problem with HOA presidents who think they can intimidate responsible homeowners into accepting blame for other people's mistakes. The consequences were clear, the lesson was learned, and everyone in the neighborhood now knows exactly where they stand when it comes to personal accountability. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Before I retired, I was manager and programmer in a department located in the U.S. I would program, manage, assign projects, create timelines, answer questions that my staff had, etc. The company I worked for decided to consolidate the U.S. and U.K. programming departments, and the new boss decided have only managers in the U.K. oversee the programmers in the U.S. This meant that I was only supposed to keep programming, I had the most experience among all the US-UK programmers, and no longer needed to do the management side of things, but I still got the same pay I used to. Due to a 6-hour time difference between the US and UK, that meant that there were only 2 or 3 hours each day that we overlapped. This left the rest of the day for my old staff to either wait until the next day to ask their new boss or come to me and I could answer immediately. The latter made more sense so they could keep working. But eventually the UK managers complained to US-UK boss that the US staff wasn't coming to them to help and were still coming to me, which the UK managers were having a conniption about. My boss told me to stop helping my old staff when they asked me questions and that they needed to ask their new manager, so it was time for malicious compliance. I went back to only programming, and when my old staff came and asked me questions, usually in the afternoons US time since the UK was done for the day, I told them I was told to no longer help them and they should ask their new UK manager the next day or send their UK boss an email with their question. I told them it was time for malicious compliance, since the US programmers knew exactly what would happen. So my old team started deluging their UK bosses with questions, problems, etc., and then had to wait until the next day or two to get answer. Within 2 weeks, the US team was missing deadlines, etc., and the UK managers had to answer for why their team was missing deadlines. After a couple more weeks, my boss and the UK managers came to the realization that due to the 6-hour time difference, there should be manager in the US, which is exactly what I told them weeks ago. Finally, my boss asked me if would like to be a manager again, and I told her I was happy just programming and didn't need the other work. They ended up giving me a raise in order to get me go back to managing the US programmers. The next one is an entitled people story. I was at a dollar store earlier, the kind with a plant in its name, and got in line. There were 2 people ahead of me, and the person checking out had about 15, 20 items or so, and the next person had 10, 15. I had about 20. This is relevant. An old lady with 3 items gets behind me, and then these 2 ladies with a couple things get behind her. Immediately, they start complaining about the lack of people working in the store. They start complaining about how everyone in front of them has too many items and how it's ridiculous people buy so much at the dollar store and how people waste their money. Huh? The red-haired one starts loudly saying, back up register, at least *7 times to try to get someone to come and get on another register. This is all while the first person is still checking out, but I gathered eventually they were dealing with an issue with that person returning an item, which held up the line. Eventually, another person did come to open another register, and once she did and the line split into 2, the 2 loud women obnoxiously congratulated the workers for being able to do their job properly. They stayed in the line behind me. I put my stuff up on the belt and wait patiently behind the lady in front of me. I start checking out, and these 2 women are making fun of what I'm purchasing. Christmas gift bags and a few other items for some context if anyone finds that relevant. I'm trying to ignore the 2 of them, and the red-haired one literally shoves my stuff on the belt to put her 4 items on the belt. I finish checking out, grab my items, and on the way out, say to the woman, you could be more patient next time. And she says back to me, you could mind your business next time. And I responded, you made at every else's business when you opened your loud mouth for everyone to hear. And I scuttled away as quickly as possible out the door because I did not want to involve myself in a fight, lol. The audacity to try to holler for another register to open is beyond me, and to then complain about what other people are buying while you yourself are buying things at a dollar store is frankly hilarious to me. And I apologize for not being able to recall all exact specifics of what people say. I deal with a brain fog, so specific things people say tend to get jumbled in my brain. The next one is an entitled parent story. The park is not your free babysitter. It is a public space and you still have to parent your kid while there. When you don't, it ruins public spaces for everyone else. Husband and I took our daughter to the park. There were 2 women there with their kids playing. At our park, there is 3 separate playgrounds, and we always try to take our daughter to an empty one if possible because she is only 1.5 and kind of slow moving on the equipment, and we know that can be annoying to older kids wanting their turns. That's what we did this time, and the group of kids followed us to the playground, which happens a lot, and we are totally okay with it. Our baby loves watching older kids go down the slide, etc. We will usually get on the equipment with her to make sure she doesn't fall off the top of the slide or do something crazy since she's so little. Especially when other kids are playing so we can help her along quicker and the other kids can get their turns. One of the boys was probably about 5 years old, was being super aggressive and literally trying to force past us to go down the slide while we were trying to help our daughter take her turn. We were literally having to block him from bulldozing her with our bodies and he was pushing and shoving us. We both were saying stuff like, "We have to take turns, don't push me. Keep your hands to yourself." The moms were close by but did nothing. We decided to take our daughter to one of the other empty playgrounds, and as soon as we are on our way, he starts running to the same playground. I turn around and go to a different playground. He follows us around 4 times doing the same thing each time, wanting the specific slide our daughter is going down, being pushy, putting his hands on us. Finally, we are at the top of one of the taller slides, and he is literally shoving my husband and I. Both we are trying to keep him off of our daughter, and he's arguing with us, telling us to let him through, etc. We are saying, "Keep you hands to yourself, it's not your turn," etc. At this point, it is unsafe for my daughter. I'm tired of the mom just ignoring this. I ask the kid who is mom as he tells me, I yell to the mom that her kid is literally shoving us and won't stop. The mom looks at me and says, "Okay." I'm mad at this point. I go down the slide with my baby and she walks over to me and says, "He's been tested for autism multiple times, so maybe consider that before you get an attitude about it." I basically told the lady that I'm sorry they are going through that, but I do not care what he has going on. His behavior is unacceptable. This woman proceeds to just act like I'm being crazy for saying anything to her, says stuff like, "You need to understand he's autistic. He's a kid and you were at the park." I stand firm saying I don't care, he can't put his hands on me or my baby. I ask her, would she be okay with some kid following her around, shoving her literal baby around? She asks me how many times he's put his hands on us and suggests that next time I let her know the first time it happens. She does not tell her child to stop. She doesn't address it with him, just keeps repeating to me he's autistic. I don't know what to tell you. I am just beyond frustrated and lose my cool a little and told the mom if her kid has so many issues she is aware of, maybe she needs to be a little more active in her parenting when she's in public with other kids around, and that I feel bad for her son. We left the park after that, but I genuinely could not believe that happened. I am a pediatric RN and I have so much compassion for kids with all types of disabilities, but it is so crazy to claim that your child should just get to do whatever he wants and put his hands on strangers just because he is autistic. If I had a child that struggled like that, I would be paying very close attention to keep my child safe. You never know how a stranger or another child is going to react to your kid getting physical with them. I'm all for accommodations, but I will not enable behavior like that, especially when it's directed at my child. I genuinely don't care what circumstances you have going on, your kid does not get to repeatedly put their hands on other people. Just because your child is possibly neurodivergent doesn't mean you are entitled to let them do whatever they want and put their hands on people. What it does mean is you are more than likely going to have to work harder and be more active than the typical parent. Is it fair? No. But those are the cards you are dealt. I don't know where this sense of entitlement came that everyone just has to deal with your kid's aggressive behavior in public, but PSA, I'm not enabling that kind of tomfoolery. If you don't want people to catch an attitude, get off your lazy butt and actively watch and parent your kid. Anyway, thank you for watching.